What's up, Scyushi Squad? We are back with more. I messed up the intro, but that's okay. So today we're going to be continuing the 36K series into the Gunslinger. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's the point in continuing the 36K series when the new update is right around the corner and actually brings our power rank well over 40K and even over 45K? Yes, that's right, it does. However, doing so is extremely time consuming, so these videos are still going to end up being very, very relevant because frankly speaking, the only new difficulty curve that's coming with the new update is going to be U11 difficulty. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, let you guys know that I'm aware of the changes that are coming, but we're going to end up rushing through the rest of the characters on the 36K series, and then I'll slowly end up updating tutorials on all of the classes and so on and so forth. But today we're going to be talking about the Gunslinger, which in my eyes is kind of the black sheep of the family. You know, like if there's any class, it's kind of like, oh, how the mighty have fallen, at least in my opinion, because the Gunslinger at one point was the strongest class in the game, and every other character was kind of irrelevant. This was way back when Shadow Towers were still a thing, and even I think when Delves first came out, Gunslinger was still pretty comparable. But they slowly ended up bringing all of the other classes up to the same par as the Gunslinger, and now slowly over time, the Gunslinger has actually gotten considerable nerfs and also barely any power increases itself, which means that steadily, slowly but surely, all of the other classes started to slowly supersede the Gunslinger. So today we're going to end up going into Geode Surface, just because currently, you know, this is the only way we can end up doing U10. We're going to spend 5 minutes doing dungeons. I'm going to talk a little bit about the class and how it's going to end up being in terms of a speed farmer and so on and so forth. And then we're going to end up going into the Delves, and we're going to try this character out to the best of our ability. Now, one thing I gotta let you guys know is I do not have a high crystal ring, because obviously I've got no Paragon levels on this guy, and I do not have a high crystal gun, because even though I had 2 crystal 4 guns, they disappeared. That's fun, but that's okay, because crystal 4 is going to be a lot more manageable and easy to obtain when the new update ends up going live. So anyways, let me make sure that I have everything all set up. We're going to have to get our new mount as well. So normally in these videos, you would see me actually using Gonda, but the Volatile Bounder, for those of you on console anyway, this is going to end up being a mount that'll eventually end up coming when you guys end up getting the Season 3 Bomber Royale stuff. Let me start my timer here. The reason why this mount is so important is because it gives you the equivalent of 10 character jumps. So let's start the timer and let's go for it. The reason why I was hiding is because I like to give you guys comparable examples of just how powerful this class can end up being at the end game alone, solo. Okay, so if you ever ended up playing with your friends, well, then you would end up knowing, okay, well, this character handles this area this well, which means that being in a group would just make it go faster. I don't know why it's always so laggy whenever I come into these worlds. So you'll see that our base attack, not bad, you know, 7 mil per shot. That's pretty comparable to some of the other classes in the game. But generally speaking, the brunt of what makes the Gunslinger so powerful was always going to end up being the ultimate ability. My God. I don't know why. There's not even anybody in this world right now. I think it's just because the test server, frankly speaking, it's just got everybody on edge and everybody's checking out the new update and stuff. So anyways, you can see that we can handle dungeons perfectly well. The way that speed farming gets broken up into different categories is going to end up being both movement speed, you know, traveling from one dungeon to another. That's going to end up being very important for speed farming. But then there's also going to end up being the time to kill, which is how quickly you can end up killing enemies within the dungeon. And you can see that the Gunslinger kind of suffers in both categories. Now, granted, I could just pop my ult and then everything would end up dying like instantaneously. But most of all, that's going to end up being where the class shines, is in areas like the Delves and, you know, fighting Leviathans and so on and so forth. Jesus, I don't think that the Gunslinger holds its own candle compared to like any of the other big boy classes in the game nowadays. You know, the Gunslinger is kind of just suffers to great effect comparatively, but you can see that even if you ended up maining the Gunslinger, you're still going to end up being able to handle this area perfectly fine, so long as you end up dealing heaps and heaps of damage. But generally speaking, if I ended up taking all these same magic gems and swapped them onto another class, well, then maybe I would end up doing a lot better. But generally speaking, there's a lot of things that I personally dislike about the Gunslinger. His movement speed is not as great as it could be. Ignore the lag. I'm sorry. It's just how Trove is, man. We gotta have these videos organic, okay? Because if I'm sitting here and I'm waiting for the lag to subside so that I can end up doing a video like this for you, it means that I'm wasting an hour of my time to do that. And even though we're in a world that literally has like one person in it. But you can see already, compared to the other characters that we've highlighted in these videos, we're at like close to 3 minutes in and we haven't even completed this one 5-star dungeon. So that just goes to show that this character is really suffering. Granted, obviously we're dealing with all of the lag and stuff like that. Oh, I forgot these P-wings were even in the game. We're obviously suffering from the lag and so on and so forth, but the travel time from one area to another is what's really, really lacking on this class, because it doesn't... Good Lord. Anyways, killing 30 enemy dungeons, no problem. You know, obviously those enemies are extremely weak. The biggest thing that I have gripes with is the slow fall. I feel is extremely dated, and in a lot of ways is kind of a hindrance to the class, because you can see that when we end up clearing out a dungeon, we want to be able to move as quickly as possible towards the exit portal and just get the heck out of here. Can't do that when we're up in the ceiling. Now that said, being up in the ceiling like this, hiding in the rafters like a coward, does have its advantages, more specifically when we're dealing with delves and strong enemies, because by being up in the air, it does potentially give you more survivability, just because you're not going to be taking damage from the melee characters, the melee enemies in the game. Now, ranged enemies are another story. You're going to have to be very careful with how you end up dodging their attacks and so on and so forth while you're in the air. But you see that these enemies right there, they were melee and they didn't end up draining any of my flasks because I was able to kill them so quickly. Now, that said, again, I can, you know, the numbers don't lie. I can already just show you guys right here, right now. Now, I'm not using this character to the best of its abilities. Obviously, I could be using Trailblazing. I do have Pyro Disc, though, and instead of using Cubic Curtain, I would recommend that you have Explosive Epilogue, but we'll save that for another build video. The only other thing that I could have done is probably just use Trailblazing, and again, if I ended up having a Crystal 4 gun, obviously my stats would have been scaled a little bit better. But that said, the class is still definitely suffering in the speed department. Let's see whether it suffers in the delves. So we're just going to end up going into a simple and clean and an easy 119 depth portal. I think before, you know, when I first started the 36K series, I was going into like depths of close to 129 and stuff like that. But generally speaking, 119 is going to end up being a comparable, you know, is going to end up showing you what the class can truly do, right? Because generally speaking, you're not going to end up doing delves solo. You're most of all going to end up doing this with a group. But the point of these videos, once again, I reiterate, is the fact that we're showing off what the class's potential is. And the best way that we can end up doing that is by playing it completely alone. And then you could just end up taking the data that we're experiencing. Oh my God, this guy is ragdolling to the bottom of the world. You can take all of the data that we end up talking about in today's video. I don't know if I want to refer to it as data. That sounds nerdy. But the point is that then you could end up just take it with a group and see, okay, well, how did this class compare to the other class, and so on and so forth, right? Generally speaking, I mean, we seem to have gotten pretty lucky with these enemies, but here's an example of the sheer amount of survivability that this class can end up having, so long as you just stay up in the air. You know, even if I end up vacuuming in all of the enemies and then I just blast down on them, Gunslinger still hits hard, right? Like, it's still going to end up being a pretty beefy class. It's still going to end up dealing heaps and heaps of damage, which definitely makes it stand out as a delve character in the game, especially the #1 ability, which just absolutely destroys. I think most of all, it's going to be when we compare it to the boss. That's where we're going to see whether or not the class has suffered greatly over time, or if it still is going to end up being a diamond in the rough, right? So going through these enemies, generally speaking, we seem to be doing just fine. It's just that unfortunately we generated with like a little bit too many enemies to end up defeating. Slow fall sometimes doesn't work, and it looks like this enemy actually generated with magical defense, which means that we can't damage it. I don't know why the devs ended up even including that as a thing in this game, just because so many of the classes in the game that end up hitting hard are going to end up being the magic classes. But let me just get things prepared, because we only have like 11 enemies to go. I just gotta end up killing a bunch of them. And then I'll see you guys at the boss. Woohoo! Okay, I gotta make sure that I do this properly. It's been a while since I ended up playing on the good old Gunslinger. Now, yeah, so we would probably end up using chromatic, because basically the way that you would end up using the Gunslinger in the past anyways, is you would basically just spam your flasks so that you could end up recharging your ultimate ability and then just spamming that constantly. So we're also going to end up using Puck because of the cooldown reduction. And then otherwise, let's just get into it and see, sorry, flash warning, because my God, the Gunslinger shots, they still, I believe that they really need to tone those down, because that causes me eye strain, and I don't even have any sensitivity of photosensitivity. I don't have photosensitivity or whatever. So you can see that the Gunslinger is kind of, I don't know, it's really suffering compared to other classes in the game. Generally speaking, we're still damaging it, we're still doing damage, that's for darn sure, and our shots are definitely doing a lot more damage than some other classes. But post the Shadowhunter update, generally speaking, I don't really see the Gunslinger as standing on its own anymore. It's not, most definitely not going to end up being one of those super beefy, like chonko classes that you would end up maining over other characters, is kind of the main point of this video. Let me actually see, what did he generate with? Some enemies have reduced dark, some enemies have increased health damage and stability, takes additional damage from players. Okay, so it must have been this one that made it just super beefcake, right? Yeah. Generally speaking though, my 2 cents towards the Gunslinger is it's suffered a lot, and ironically, even though all of the other classes slowly started getting up to par with the Gunslinger, I feel like in a lot of ways they ended up passing the Gunslinger, you know, by a couple miles. And the Gunslinger is actually one of the classes that is in need of a desperate buff, which I know sounds very odd, and there might be some Gunslinger mains out there with some little tricks that probably end up making the character a lot more viable. But generally speaking, from what I've seen, barely anybody's playing the Gunslinger anymore. I kind of feel like it's, I don't know, it's lost its edge, man. And I really think that the class could end up using a rework. Not even just a stat buff. Like a stat buff would be cool, but generally I still think that this class could use a rework to its abilities and end up becoming a lot more viable. Now that said, I do want to reiterate that this is not a perfect comparison compared to the other classes that we've covered in the 36K series, just because of the fact that I don't have ideal gear on this guy. But generally speaking, I still think that the class is a little bit weaker than it should be currently, especially when compared to the other characters in the game. Now, as far as just killing things in normal Uber worlds and stuff like that, even in when Uber 11 ends up coming out into the game, generally speaking, I think you'll be okay, because U11 enemies are just so tanky that you will in fact end up using your ultimate ability, whereas when you saw when I was in U10, there was no real reason to use our ultimate, which does mean that you're going to end up going through Flask very quickly. But anyways, hopefully you found this video helpful. I gotta record the next 36K video. So before you go, I would appreciate if you smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want, support the channel, and have a wonderful day, everybody.